Welcome back. Journalists fancy themselves superhuman observers of history. The truth is that we are susceptible to trauma as the victims who tell those stories that we tell. Newsrooms have a reputation for being high-pressure workplaces, so stress is often dismissed as simply part of the job. This morning I want to talk about the mental health of media professionals. Joining me today is my colleague in the media industry, somebody I've known for a number of years, Sunday Times political reporter Qaanitah Hunter. Qaanitah, thank you for joining us, giving us some of your Sunday morning.
Thank you very much for having me, Mike.
Straight off the bat, I will say that I am receiving treatment for depression, for anxiety, for hypervigilance, insomnia. I'd like to know what your journey is with mental health and this profession that we love so much.
So, my story is a bit different because I started journalism at a very, very young age, much younger than probably a normal graduate would, because I was 17, 18 already on the field. And it only took me up until I turned 25 to realize that the way that I was feeling and the way that the things that I was going through was not, in quote unquote, normal. And so I started seeking assistance for my anxiety and for the sort of cyclical depression that I was going through.
Is there a stigma in this industry to saying that what we see traumatizes us?
Absolutely. I think it's part of the bravado of this industry. And I think that there are two parts of it. Firstly, I say this often, I think there's an engineering flaw in the sense that people don't realize that the impact of the work that we do and the impact of the things that we see may not affect us immediately, but affects us later on. But secondly, it's the normalization of this extreme culture that you cover trauma and then you wake up the next day and you go back to normal. That I think compounds the problem. But Mike, firstly, what I battled with was we have a absolute luxury or privilege rather to be able to do what we do. We witness history, we tell stories, we're at the forefront of things changing every single day in this country. It's a privilege. Many people don't have that privilege. And constantly in my mind, it's this thing that, I'm lucky to be able to do what I love. This is what I've always wanted to do. And so there's that part of it, right? The second part of it is that you have to contest with the fact that we are human. And again, as part of this, I don't know if it's this engineering flaw of our industry, but it's this constant, effort to believe that we are superhuman and that mundane things such as feeling and exhaustion and stress and anxiety are things that don't affect us. What affects us and what motivates us is the story and the story alone. And the thing is, for a very long time, this perpetuated, and you'd hear stories about absolute dysfunction among senior reporters and people who were really historic and legends in our industry, who lived dysfunctional lives. And it becomes normalized in many ways because, it is what it is. And I think for me what was the most liberating thing was to come out and say, guys, this is not okay. We need to seek help. And some months ago, I put it on Twitter, I sort of linked an article that I found interesting about the fact that it doesn't mean that if you are not a war correspondent or, covering trauma every day, you cannot be traumatized as a journalist. There are other things that affect us all the time. South Africa is a highly politicized environment. We don't even see covering protests as covering conflict.
It's just part of a normal Monday or Wednesday.
Absolutely. And so I think that when sort of I decided to say, I went for counseling, I went for extensive amount of therapy, and I've sort of come out of this. There was random people stopping me, old males who are known in this industry would be like, Q, I just started seeing a therapist and I thought it was bogus on my first day, but I'm on my second session and I feel a little better. And I feel like, that just took away the drama. It just took away the the tabooness of it all, but more importantly, it was not a story of she hit rock bottom and then she got help.
Yes.
It was she found herself in a very precarious situation, she got help, and she thrived concurrently.
So let me ask you this. You said you started journalism at a very young age, and I'm sure many of us would have wanted some sort of indication when we were studying journalism. So what I'm asking is, should mental health care have been introduced at a university course level as something for journalists to take, to say, this is what to look out for, this is how you can be affected, and if you are affected, get help?
Absolutely. I think there's also two elements to it. There's obviously the financial element of it. Seeking therapy or mental health care in South Africa is an expensive thing. So as a young journalist, if you are sent to you're sent to a protest and people threaten to burn your car and you're feeling a bit anxious and whatever the case is, you don't possibly have the funds to go and phone a therapist and say, I need help and this is how I feel. So I do think that, at a university level, to empower journalists with tools to say, okay, this is how you look out for certain things. This is what you need to do. The element of debriefing is an important thing. And I think that if there's a consciousness from the time you're at university, it eliminates somewhat that bravado that comes with the industry. So when you are in a place where you feel like you need help, it's not something extraordinary for you to go and seek help.
So, the industry, late nights, early mornings, social media pressure. That's not even something we've touched on yet, the social media element, social media bullying. This sort of profession doesn't lend itself to a healthy lifestyle. Should we be looking to potentially legislate compulsory mental health days, just as you have leave, paternity leave, maternity leave, family responsibility day? Should there be mental health day?
So what my approach was that we need to have a conversation within the South African National Editors Forum. And I know, SANEF has a whole lot of constrictions over what they can talk about, what they can't talk about. But for me, before you take this nationally and make it a problem of the health minister, or you make it the problem of, depression groups or whatever, within our own industry, we need to create a realization among our own editors who probably suffering from the same fate that we are and have normalized it in their lives, to say we need to create mechanisms that do not cause burnout, which is, a very, it's something that we pride ourselves on as journalists. Oh, I've just worked a 16-hour day. It's abnormal. You should not be working a 16-hour day. Yeah. And to have early detection of burnout or anxiety or any sort of
substance abuse, reliance on particular things. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then I think the other thing is to create mechanisms that are internal newsroom policy, to say that in this scenario we have these mechanisms, whether it's an in-house counsellor, whether it is mental health days, which I think are very important, or just support on different levels. Obviously, this industry is not one for cuddling or just people. It's not a very affectionate industry,
no.
But my point is that if you create these mechanisms, you have longevity of journalists. The problems is that people peak and then they drop and then they leave the industry. People peak and then they hit rock bottom and they leave the industry. And it's not good, for the journalism industry, but more importantly for people's lives. And so, there's almost the sentiment is that in my 20s I can do this, I have the strength to do it. But by the time I hit my 30s, I need to find a way out. I need an out, almost like an abusive relationship, because I'm unable to sustain this lifestyle. And I think to have the longevity and for the good of the craft, to have people to stay and pass on institutional memory, pass on skill set to young people like myself, it's important then to create an environment where people are not exiting en masse once they hit rock bottom.
Are there pressures in South Africa that are potentially unique to this country around race, class, gender, that make our jobs as journalists particularly difficult?
Absolutely. I think that I met a journalist from Kenya who said to me, South Africa is a series of awkward conversations. And I said, absolutely, because so in your reporting, you have to consider, you're dealing with issues of patriarchy, you're dealing with issues of just violent crime everywhere you go. You're dealing with a highly politicized environment. And then you're dealing with the other factors of race relations and, like I said, patriarchy. And so all of this compounds your life as a South African. It's almost traumatic just being a South African and then being a journalist. And so what happens is these manifest itself in different ways because you're dealing with online abuse that are often have all of these elements thrown into it. And the thing is, for me, what has been a big trigger for me has been patriarchy, and I've always been very vocal about it, in the sense that would I have been attacked in the way that I have been attacked if I was not a female? And that's something that we have to start having that honest conversation about. And how do we protect female journalists, not from men out there, but within creating patriarchal norms within newsrooms or within the reporting field. And so for me, I think that there's a sort of a combination of all of this that stresses us as human beings ordinarily. It stress anyone out, but because you're at the core, it's like we see the ugly inner belly of the world that we live in daily, and then we have to sort of go home and forget that what we saw, and then tomorrow come back and see the same thing. And I think that without like I said, we have to be grateful for the jobs that we have and have to appreciate the privilege, but not taking away from the fact that it has disastrous impacts on people's lives if the help is not sought or the proper support is not given to them.
Do people simply look at, let's say, the tag of depression? I mean, we all have, let's say, public personas. You're a television reporter, you're a big shot Sunday Times political reporter. You're out there, you're at press conferences, people see you on television, people read your articles on a weekly basis, they see you on social media, you're strong, you're brave, you're open. Do we have two faces? Of course we have two faces. Do you think the public understands that?
I don't think the public understands that, and which is probably why some of us are subjected to the type of online trolling and abuse that we get, and so that's just literally, Mike, that's a whole show to just talk about the impact of that kind of abuse. And I give you a personal anecdote. I started working for the Sunday Times, and I just could not sleep on a Saturday night. It was just, I had the most amount of anxiety. I would have a panic attack, really. And it turns out, because on social media we're promoting stories on a Saturday evening for the Sunday paper, the amount of trolling that I would get, and I mean, if you in that moment of reading it, you can say, this is just a troll. But the impact that it has on you and your well-being is something that can actually have a physical impact, where you're suffering from insomnia now and you're actually having a panic attack.
Combination of those little voices that we allow into our heads. I mean, we allow people into our private spaces. If you're lying in bed, trolling or scrolling through Twitter, being trolled, you allow those people power, and eventually they get into your head. Is it not good to quickly, before we end, just go on a complete social media hiatus, get away from it? Can you, as a journalist, afford to?
I had a conversation with another journalist, and this person said that they've done this and it was the best thing that has happened to them. I don't know if I'm able to do this, but one quick thing, Mike. I had spoken to a politician, and she said she had come out to say that she suffers from depression and she suffers from anxiety, and that was translated in the wrong way, because people would react to her being militant or raising points as saying this is a mad person. And that is the danger of people coming out to say, no, I suffer from anxiety and I sought help for it, because we live in a society where as a politician, you know what you signed up for. As a journalist, you know what you signed up for. And that's not how it's supposed to be.
Qaanitah Hunter, Sunday Times political reporter, thank you for your bravery and your openness and for joining us this Sunday morning. Still ahead on The Fix, we speak to a panel of journalists about the big stories coming up in the week ahead. Stay with us.